Ba-da-bum, ba-dum-bum, bum, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Melanie. This is Adventures in Hostessville, and this is episode 9 of the Vintage Magazine Project, and the first episode of the 1969 magazine. This thing is amazing. I don't know when I have ever seen so many unironic usages of words like far out and groovy and freaky. So the first episode of the month is the cooking episode, and this magazine doesn't actually have any recipes in it, but it does have this cover article called Now Arlo and Pals Are Filming Alice's Restaurant. And there's this whole article here in the middle, like a 3-page spread about the filming of this movie. It's based on the even greater song Alice's Restaurant by Arlo Guthrie. But the real Alice decided to take advantage of the publicity of the song in the movie and write a cookbook. And as you can tell by the pictures of Alice, she is amazing. This book is pretty light on recipes and very heavy on hippie hints. She says, there is no ingredient that you can't leave out or substitute for. People who have ever been around me cooking now know that Alice is my secret twin. She says, the basic ingredient is your attitude. People are lucky to eat your cooking. If you tell people that your cooking is absolutely fantastic, if you squeeze their arm and whisper in their ear that this meal is going to be the greatest yet, they're going to love it. They'll never suspect that strange taste in the potatoes is that you've just burned them. They'll naturally assume that it's some exotic flavor that their innocent taste buds have never experienced. Unless you've made some hideous mistake, never apologize. There is so much wisdom of Alice. I can't share it all here. I'll share a bunch more of her tips on my Patreon. That link is down below if you want to hear more. But I am actually following sort of a plan here. I'm in fact making an entire chapter of Alice's head snacks. The first thing that Alice says I should do to prepare, like she's really big on loosey-goosey impromptu stuff, but she says you should always take a look and make sure you have what you need or at least what you're going to substitute. And she says the best way to do that is to relax and have a glass of wine. So I'm going to do that. Now, it's a screw top. Alice says there's no reason to buy a $7 bottle of wine. If you are not familiar with the term head snacks, what they are snacks for you to eat when you have the munchies. Like I told my sister about it and she's like, oh, you mean like pot brownies? And no, we're not talking about edibles. These are just the things like the Doritos that you have around. So I have never actually personally been high, but I mean, I have a theater degree from a liberal arts college, so I know what a head snack is. Ooh. So here's another one of my favorite things that Alice says. She says, just because you own like 3 plates and a fork doesn't mean that you can't make a dinner for 12 people. She's like, put some tinfoil on a hubcap. There you go. You've got a plate. I'm putting my snacks on to an actual plate, like the bougie square that I am. But the next thing on her list of head snacks that she recommends is peach or apricot nectar. I didn't have those things, so I'm just using this juice from a can of peaches that I bought. Here's the thing, if you didn't guess by now, Alice isn't like a chef. She was an art student who married another hippie, and they went off and worked at this school in like this liberal hippie high school in Massachusetts, and then started inviting all the students and former students over to their house, which was actually a deconsecrated church because hippies. And she ended up like cooking all this food for all these stoned teenagers all the time anyway, and ultimately was like, I may as well get paid for cooking. I'm gonna have a restaurant. All right, so the next snack I'm going to make is the only one that even has a recipe listed in it, and that is Alice's fruit salad. And even this recipe is really more of a suggestion. She just says, take a bunch of fruit, throw it into a bowl, stir it up with sour cream or yogurt or both, And then she says to sprinkle in some cinnamon and sugar and some nuts and some raisins. And there you go. So that's what I'm gonna do. I've got these canned peaches. I had a can of pears. I've got an apple that is well past its peak. I think one of the things that I particularly love about Alice, first off, is how chill she is, how much she loves sour cream, how great she looks in those white pants, but then also just how she managed to parlay hosting into this whole career. And there's actually another article in the I magazine about some guys who did something similar. Here is Cerebrum, 429 Broome Street at Crosby, phone 226-0021. This is a combination Roman pleasure palace and post-2001 playroom. Cerebrum. Now, if you're not familiar with New York, Broome at Crosby is in Soho, which now is sort of Sex and the City land, but in the late 60s was derelict warehouse land. So you show up in this like dark, deserted neighborhood, and 429, the building that you're going to, doesn't have any lights on. It just looks completely deserted. There's a for rent sign in the window. And then you find yourself in this pitch black room. And the only light is one of those tiny little illuminated doorbells. And you ring it, and then a voice says, "Welcome to Cerebrum. Do you have a reservation?" And to the door comes this beautiful woman in this diaphanous hooded white robe and nothing else, and this dude in a silver spacesuit. Like I said, I tried to find out as much as I could about this place, and it's really hard to find a lot. It was only open for less than a year. It opened in November of 1968, and it was closed by like the summer of 69. And most of what I could find were a couple little blurbs here and there, and then a lot of conversations in comment threads. So you get a lot of conversations where it's like, oh, I worked at Cerebrum. I'm Katie. Do you remember me? I was there with my boyfriend, Sky Blue. And then somebody else is like, oh, yeah, I remember you. I'm Hank. I mean, then I was Moondog. And their memories don't always match up. There's a lot of diverging thoughts on basically everything. And I think that part of that is just because it was 50 years ago. But also, I'm pretty sure anybody that came within about a 10-mile radius of this place got at least a contact high. All right, the next thing she says is great for head snacks is Boysenberry Sherbet. I went to the grocery store and they didn't have any, so I am substituting these salt and vinegar potato chips. All right, the next thing on Alice's list of head snacks is hot chocolate pudding on ice cream. So she says there's no reason to make your own pudding. You can just use the store-bought ones and zhuzh them up a little bit. So the guy in the space suit, that's a fella named Ruffin Cooper Jr. And from what I can understand, he was one of the main guys that had the idea behind Cerebrum. Again, it's all very nebulous. If you're watching this, if you worked at Cerebrum or went to Cerebrum, please let me know about it and let me know what really happened, because I'm super fascinated by it. So anyway, he and his roommates would have these sort of loft parties and people would come over and they would get high and whatever, but then it would be this like sensory experiment. And they decided, couldn't we make some money doing this? They rent this space down on Broome Street, and they get these guys, Richard Curry and Bob Jack Calejo, who are a lighting designer and a set designer. They put an ad in, I don't know if it was the Village Voice, but one of those, freebie newspapers. And the ad just says, we're looking for a carpenter to work for free building an experimental club. This guy, John Storick, who actually had gone to Princeton for architecture, but he's in some beginning job. He's just out of college. He's in this beginning job that he doesn't like. He's waiting in line for an ice cream, and he sees this thing, and he's like, yeah. Okay, the pudding is hot. The ice cream is cold. I'm just gonna put a little bit of this on here. Yes, Alice. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, sister, yes. The next thing on her list is an ice cream sundae, which seems not super different than this. So I am just going to substitute that. Alice says that in her most debauched nights, sometimes she skips the fancy drinks and just alternates slugs of whiskey with shots of Ready Whip straight into her mouth. I don't like whiskey. It tastes like burnt carpet padding, but I'll do the other part. All right, next on her list are lemons, limes, oranges, and grapefruits cut into fun shapes. At least the lemons and the limes seem like they're going to be very sour on their own, but all throughout the book, she makes a point of saying how like contrast and excitement and surprise are super important in a menu. And contrast and excitement and surprise are also exactly what they wanted you to get when you went to Cerebrum. Is a triangle interesting? So first off, you have to take off your shoes, but then you are handed a diaphanous robe just like they have, and you are encouraged to take off as many of the rest of your clothes as you are comfortable with. You get inside the room and you walk up this ramp and everything's white. The ceilings are white, the walls are white, there's white plush carpeting all over the ground, and there are these a bunch of different little platforms all connected by this catwalk in the middle. And each platform holds, like, say, 4 to 6 people. And then they each have these different sensory experiences. So you traverse about them during the night. I think originally it was planned to be this big soundscape, and then as it went on, it's just like whoever was running the sound booth could play whatever they wanted. So like sometimes it was Mozart, sometimes it was Frank Zappa, sometimes it was sitar music, who knows? And so these guides come around and they bring you your snacks, and what you get is a goblet of water, and then you get marshmallows. That was it. That was the snacks. So there's no drinks, there's no cocktails. The idea, I think, was that you were going to show up at this preloaded. And then the guides would come around and they would rub lotion on you that in some cases was scented, or it was sort of menthol, so it would be tingly. There was fog, like scented fog going throughout the room. There were all these light shows and projections and all this stuff on the walls. And again, this is 1969. There aren't computerized lighting systems, right? And now we could probably make something similar to this just with, you know, an iPhone and some stuff we bought at Spencer Gifts. But in 1969, there were a ton of people needed to run this. There were balloons, and there were like big weather balloons that would be these giant orbs that would go around, and they would bring you stuff to play with, like a tambourine or Viewmasters or mirrors and kaleidoscopes. And then the grand finale at the end of the night is they bring out this big, one of those like big white silk parachutes. Just like, you know, when you're a kid in grade school and you go in the gym and you're bouncing the ball, except for that there's no ball. And instead of elementary school students, it's a bunch of high-ass adults. I'm concerned that my fruit shapes aren't very interesting. So now I'm just like jabbing into this. I don't know. No matter what I cut, they turn into a triangle. The actual Cerebrum didn't last very long, but the guys that founded it all went on to do this amazing stuff. So both Bob Jack and Richard Curry, they get picked up by Charles Ludlam, who runs a ridiculous theatrical company, really sort of stalwart avant-garde theater in New York of the 70s and 80s. Ruffin Cooper Jr., he becomes an abstract photographer, largely of architectural things. And at one point, I think in 1985, this huge portrait that he had done of part of the Statue of Liberty was like blown up and plastered all along one side of Port Authority bus terminal in New York. And John Storick, he gets picked up by maybe the most famous visitor who has been to Cerebrum, and that is the one and only Mr. Jimi Hendrix. Somehow he's like, you know, I really like the aesthetic of that Cerebrum place. And so he goes in, and like early 20-something John Storick gets hired to design Electric Lady Studios. Unfortunately, Jimi Hendrix then dies in 1970, so he doesn't record in it for very long, but everyone has recorded there. Like everyone has recorded Electric Lady Studios. And John Storick is now like the guy for acoustic architecture. Everything from recording studios to arena stadiums for concerts and concert halls and TV studios, private studios for Jay-Z and Bruce Springsteen and Alicia Keys and Green Day. The very last thing on Alice's list is a cardamom seed. So I've got some. Boy, these have been around a long time, but we'll see how they are. A cardamom seed. Done. So here it is, my head snack array. Welcome to Cerebrum. Do you have a reservation?